Yo, hey, it's me, Brent from New D Review. I'm the webmaster, and I'm here to do the follow-up review for Fallout, the board game. I already did the unboxing video, and I promised that I would follow up after I've had a chance to look at this game, and I'll just give you my quick thoughts. We're going to talk fairly briefly about the game. I don't want to go on too long. I'm not going to do a complete review, but I'm just going to give you my initial impression, because that's what I think is fairly important, is just the initial impression of how this game is, because I think it'll change over time the more you play it due to the complexity. So this is what that's what we're gonna talk about, and it's on a shoestring budget too. I can't afford special graphics or fancy editing, so all in one take. And I barely got through to do the opening scene, so yeah, there we go. Alright, so I originally wanted to get this game for Christmas, just so me and my brother can play it, my family, because we grew up playing Fallout on the PC, and my Windows 98 compact Presario, and that thing still runs. So we've been playing this series since the beginning in the late 90s, so something like this, when I first saw it, was really, really cool, and it reminded me of the turn-based mechanics of the original game. Because, I mean, this is a board game, you're going to go through turns. That's what my first impression was, is that, wow, they're capturing the spirit of the original game. And I think that in itself is pretty cool. But there's some things that are definitely worth talking about with the game. I guess what you're really looking to find out is whether or not it's worth it getting this game. Yeah, it's worth it. It's definitely cool. But beware that it has a high level of complexity. I don't think I'm going to take this home for Christmas just because of the time it would take to set up and teach people how to play it. Christmas is busy. You want to spend time with the family, and if you do play games, you want to have simple games that everyone knows how to play. Monopoly is a great example of that. So with this type of game, I think it's a little too complex to bring up for the first time. It would be something that you want to ease people into over a longer period of time. And I think that's kind of a disadvantage of the game, but I don't think it's something that would hold the game back entirely. It just means that you have to take your time with it. It took me a while to learn how to play this game. I spent a few days just reading the manual and looking through all the assets and just kind of figuring out how things are put together. So if it took me a few days, just imagine what it would be for someone who's never played a board game of this magnitude at all. So that's something to consider if you were to play this for the first time with your family. Oh, my head's out of the thing. I should sit down a little bit there. That's our backwoods editing. Alright, okay, so what else can we talk about? So yeah, it's complex, but it's definitely not out of the realms of learning, I guess you could say. Like, you will be able to figure it out, and once you do, it's pretty neat. There's a lot of cool things. Again, it comes back to being a round-based game, so turn-based, if you want to think of it like that. You've got, I don't know if you can see it, but you've got your special, it's almost like your Pip-Boy. The funny thing is that kind of reminds me of the Fallout 1 and 2 in-game screen. So I think that's really neat. I know I already said it, but yeah, this game definitely reminds me of the first two Fallout games in isometric view. And I think that's cool, because for me, those were I put the most time into those games. Me and my brother would, yeah, we spent a whole summer playing that game. It was great. So stuff like that is really neat. There's a lot of mission cards, if you can see it. Look at that, that's pretty thick. And then there's a lot of things that you have to manipulate and work with throughout the game. But like I said, it's not too bad. You work through, you have 2 sets of things you can do per round. You have a number of things that you can do. You can only choose 2 per round. So that's kind of neat. You can either explore, fight, move your character, explore these tiles, and that's kind of how you do it. And you go through turns. You have an agenda card system, which controls the enemies. So if you're wondering, well, how do the enemies work? It's actually pretty easy. These agenda cards, they have little icons on it. You won't be able to see with my backwoods editing, but it shows you what type of enemy is at the bottom of the card, and then that tells you to just move the enemy around. Move it as close to the player as you can. So the agenda system controls the enemies, but the agenda system also is how you beat the game too. I was kind of worried about how would you beat this game and how does that work. You basically collect influence points through the agenda cards that you will get after you complete missions. So you're really completing missions throughout the game, and these cards, these are the I forget what they're called, story cards, I guess. I should read the manual a little bit more, but it tells you exactly what to do and how it all fits together. And so you've got random encounter cards in these 2 piles, and you use them on certain tiles. So you have to be at a certain space to use these cards if that's what you choose to do for your round. And then cards can be added to these decks after completing missions. So it's really about going through and doing these missions, and these missions prompt other cards to come out of this action deck, or the story deck, I guess you could call it. And then that's how the game evolves. So it's you can sort of think of it as a choose-your-own-adventure type of thing. You go down one or the other path, but it's all based on the faction system. So there's 2 factions in the game. One or the other can win. So the faction can beat the game and you lose, basically. And so each of these story cards usually drives the faction forward to the end of the game. So if the faction gets too many points, you lose. The faction wins. So you sort of have to figure out, if I do this mission, I'm going to further one faction or the other. And then you have to think, well, if you do that, they may beat you. So you have to make considerations in that way. Factions have their own little icons there. Yeah, you can't see that. Yeah, sorry. Anyways, these are special enemies, and they have their own abilities based on the cards here. So it's all it's all here. A lot of the information, once you've gone through it, is somewhat intuitive. So it's not too bad. If I was to play this with anybody right now, I'd have to be using the manual a lot and double checking things. So that, again, that's why I sort of didn't want to bring this home, at least not yet, not until I get really familiar with this, so it's almost second nature. So with the faction system, you're having to decide what faction are you going to further. You can declare allegiance to the faction with your agenda cards that you get to keep, so you can show this to other players. If it's one player, then that's kind of its own thing. And then that's how the story kind of evolves, and monsters move around the map. My character right now is stuck at the tower. I did a few encounters there, but I'm also low on HP, so if I move around, I may die. But it's not too bad. Your character ends up at the start of the map, which is on the other side. And you lose items, but that's it. So the death system isn't super crushing, but it's kind of a part of how you evolve and play through the game. One player seems to work fairly well. You just kind of keep track of the rounds yourself. You have the agenda cards there that dictate how things work. When you go through all of the agenda cards, you advance the faction. So there's those types of mechanics that push the game forward. So after you finish a round, you do your actions, you use the agenda card system to move the enemies around. So that's kind of how it works. I'm jumping all over the place, so forgive me. Yeah, you know, I mean, it's pretty cool. I like all the designs. The story cards seem very interesting and also very amusing and entertaining, which I think is a nice little kind of nod of your hat to the Fallout series. Because man, there were some really weird stories and crazy dialogue in those games that are just it just makes you laugh and think like, oh, wow, who wrote this? Like, holy cow, this is great. So where do we end up with Fallout, the board game? I recommend it. Go pick it up, but also realize that you're gonna need to spend some time with it. It's not a game that you can just immediately pick up and play. You will need to read a lot of the instructions to understand how the mechanics work. But once you do read them, it seems fairly easy to work through. The leveling system is simple to manipulate once you get it. You get nice perks, which are like one-time use things. So that's cool. You get your special tokens built up, and you leveling is exponential. I think that's the right word, where it gets larger over time. So the more special tokens you have on your board, like right here, the more it takes to level up. So that's kind of like in Fallout as well too. It takes more experience points to level up your character the higher level you are. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The rad system is pretty cool. If you have more rads than HP, you're dead basically. And you can have permadeath in this game too, which is very interesting. If you've accumulated too many rads, you can't come back to life because there's technically no life to come back to. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So you do have to be very careful in the game as you traverse the landscape. You don't want to soak up too much radiation because it will kill you, like in real life. What else is there? What else can we say? I didn't plan to really do a full in-depth review. I just wanted to kind of give my impression. But I guess that's also my impression too. I was able to soak up a lot of stuff while I was reading it. So my impression is fairly, I guess, deep anyways. You've got a card system up top that is your items and loot that you get. There's a store that you can buy items from, and accessing the store is very easy too. It's all prompted through encounter systems in certain places. So once you really get into this game, the cards they direct you on what to do. So there's comfort in that. So you kind of have to just go with it basically, and kind of help tell the story yourself. If you're playing with others, you speak out loud a lot so that you can explain the story. I think how these quests work is that they're open for everybody to complete. I think that's how it works. I haven't really looked into that more in depth. The battle system is pretty easy to work with. You have like one fight. You roll the dice, you resolve whatever you have to resolve, and then that's it. You don't just keep battling, so it's like a one-time thing. You can, I think, move through enemies. I'm not sure if that's how it works yet, but enemies can attack you when they're supposed to move from the agenda cards. And some enemies become inactive by flipping them over like that. So there's lots of cool things that all kind of fit together. Enemies respawn at certain points, so that's kind of neat too, right? In the game, enemies respawn, which is kind of part of the video game, I don't know what to call it, a video game convention, respawning. So that's kind of been put into this, which is kind of it's kind of weird. It feels almost surreal because respawning in a video game is sort of just, it's part of the video game world, but it's been added into the board game, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, what else really is there to say? I'm going to try and play this with other people probably in the new year after I play this more and figure it out. And then there's the expansion. You can get the California expansion, which is cool. I'm happy they did that because that's the New Vegas setting. I think it is the Mojave Desert, California. Yeah, so it fits nicely in that. So if this works out, and I play through it and beat it and all that, I'll probably get the expansion and play with that some more too. So yeah, there it is. That's my impression of the game. If you like the Fallout series, absolutely get it. Even if the game doesn't work out for you, it's still a cool thing to have. Just looking at all the pieces, it's pretty neat. Even if you never play the game, it'd be a cool thing to have in your collection at the very least. That would be like the worst case scenario for you, is you have something that is really cool to just have. And I guess a final note on these types of board games as well is that these are pretty complex board games, and that in itself is becoming interesting because board games are changing and evolving. They're becoming more complex, and I think that's really interesting because video games, they're also evolving too. But being a board game, it exists in the physical world. It's not digital. It's not something that has to be, it doesn't require like hardware, like a gaming system. So this never will go out of date. It will just go out of style. People may not want to play it in the future, but this game will always still work. So think about that. That's kind of a weird thing. I was thinking, well, maybe in 60 years, what's this game gonna be like? I mean, who knows what video games are gonna look like in 30 years and 40 years. But the great thing about board games, especially a complex game like this, is that you'll always be able to play it. It's just a matter of reading the instructions, putting the game together, and finding people to play it. But a video game, you may not be able to play a video game forever, so that's something to think about. Maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they'll figure out ways to allow games to continue to exist. You know, the old Nintendo cartridges, that system is great because you can still play the games. Even the PlayStation discs, you can still play them because you don't need the internet. That was an interesting thing. But yeah, when I thought about having this game, I was thinking, I have this forever. This game will always work. I just need to play it. So that's something to consider in the long term, is if there's no electricity for whatever reason, you can always play Fallout the board game. Alright, I'll catch you later.